the opener. Go back on the internet.
And yeah, no, absolutely. I really appreciate y'all's patience as we've been getting through. So we're going to officially start. My name is Allie Crandall.
And my name is Scott Mann.
And we are the director and creative director of the Athenaeum Press here at Coastal Carolina University. And we are so excited to have a little bit of a reunion today amongst our inaugural publication crew. What the Athenaeum Press is that we are a student-driven publishing lab, and we're going to share a couple visuals. At Coastal Carolina University here in Conway, South Carolina. Now, we are a regional public university, and so we are a regional public-facing press. Rather than a traditional academic press, what the Athenaeum Press has done is that we take an idea for a project, hand it over to a group of fabulous undergraduate students and graduate students as well, and they create something really magical out of that project. As you can see on the screen, we've done CD projects, 360 documentaries, a photo book, archive work, as well as interview projects that showcase the hidden histories of our region, which is the southeast of the United States. We've collaborated locally and internationally.
Our projects are regionally focused, but they have three simple criteria. They both have to have analog and digital components. It has to be sellable. And third, and most important, they are created, written, edited, and designed by our students. So it is our students that's the heart and soul of the Athenaeum Press. As Allie said, we have our group of the original project, Chasing the Paper Canoe, with us today. So it's kind of a reunion. I'm not sure all of us have gotten together since everyone's graduated. But let's introduce them. First, we have Selkei Hodge, which was a photographer on the project. Tracy Fish, which was another photographer on the project, and our lone designer, Marcello Garofalo, was our designer. And then along with that is the co-faculty member, Easton Selby, which was a photographer, professor on the project. All right, welcome all. It's exciting to get us all back in the same space. It's been a long time that all of us have gotten together. So I'm going to start out by asking each one of you a question. I'll start with Selkei. Can you tell us a little bit about the project, how you got involved, and what your role was?
So the way I remember the project was, retelling and retracing the path of Nathaniel Bishop as he traveled through the Waccamaw River. Because if I recall, it was an anniversary of the university and an anniversary of his journey. And so we were trying to figure out how to tell, I believe that it was the story of the river that was and the river that is. And I got involved when I was in the gallery in the Edwards building and looking at some work, and Easton was in there and he goes, "Hey, Scott and I are doing this thing. Do you want to be a photographer for it? It's a studio project." I was like, yeah, cool. I'm a photographer. And that was sort of how I got into it. And I can't recall the connection between the press and the former Luska studio, but that was my inroad in from being a student. And if I recall correctly, Marcello and Tracy were as well, and I'll speak for them.
All right, how about you, Tracy?
Yeah, so from what I remember and kind of echo Selkei a little bit, it was about this person who traveled from Quebec down to the Gulf of Mexico through waterway. And kind of the original ethos of, I would say, the press has always kind of been to tell regional stories. And this was kind of an example of that, because on that journey, he traveled through, I would say, just local waterway communities that we're able to kind of return back to in a contemporary time and be able to kind of see what it is now compared to what it was then. So from what I remember, kind of was, I'm trying to think, as a student, I was part of the early days of Luska, which was a pre-professional studio. I'm not sure, do you guys still have Luska as part of the
We
university?
do,
So
yes.
it's I mean, you know, it's yeah. So it was one of the early kind of hands-on courses that Coastal started kind of pushing out, which was, I mean, for me, it was great. And it's kind of same deal where Easton kind of came in and was like, hey, do you want to do this project? And I'm like, cool. I also take pictures. So let's do this. Let's make this happen. So yeah, that's pretty much the short abridged version of how that worked out.
Wonderful. Marcello, how did you become involved?
Well, you know, I was a newer student to Coastal and I really didn't know anybody, but I remember, you know, Scott, I had taken your class that first semester and you were like, hey, you know, you should get involved in LUSCA. Once I did actually get involved, you know, I was very shy. I definitely did not know, you know, Selkei or Tracy, but I remember Easton and, you know, you and Scott were both like, hey, you know, we have this project going on. We have this concept. And I remember the word, we're going to reimagine. And reimagine is a great word. You should always use that word when talking about, you know, doing something, you know, for the second time. It's like, you know, we're going to go through these areas of South Carolina where this story took place. You know, there was this man, Nathaniel Bishop, that created this paper canoe and he went all the way down. And, you know, we want to see, you know, that difference between the past and the future. What's that evolution? So we have these really fantastic photographers. You know, there's students here. You know, I'd seen some of their work and I was like, wow, you know, they actually have some serious talent. And he's like, you know, we need a designer though. I said, sure, I'll get involved. Not a problem. I don't think you guys knew what you were getting into, but I hope that, you know, it was a good thing, or at least entertaining at the very least. So, yeah, so that was my introduction to LUSCA Studio and the project itself, right? So it's like I was like, you know, I thought it was very cool. It's like, okay, let's do something that's photography based. I knew, you know, we're going to do this nice, cool kind of book and go from there.
Wonderful. Easton, they keep talking about LUSCA Studio. Can you give us a little bit of background on LUSCA Studio?
Well, Scott, you may have to chime in here too, because this, you know, the LUSCA Studio was born out of, I don't know, it was a conversation that you and I had talking about the lack of internships in Myrtle Beach for photographers, designers, things like that. But you and I collaborated on a lot of projects leading up to this. And so we thought, what if we pitched this idea for a pre-professional studio of projects that photography students can work on, designers can work on, because both you and I have talked about that the language of art is very similar, but people view things very differently based on the medium in which they work. And so photographers and designers work always together. So why not put this all together into a space that is and became the pre-professional studio and LUSCA Studio. So how it came about is complicated. So it was born out of a long discussion, long, you know, extended conversations, you know, conversations with the provost, and then all of a sudden there was money, and it happened almost overnight. And yeah, and then
remind me, I mean, we had a captured audience in Selkei and Tracy, I believe, were members of the LUSCA Studio, but was Marcello a member of the LUSCA Studio at that time?
No, he was recruited in. You
He
brought
was
him
recruited in.
Yeah, I actually remember the conversation. You said, Easton, there's this really great designer. Like, I think we should try to bring him in. I'm like, whatever. Let's get Marcello in. I don't know him, but that sounds great.
And for our audience, just to make things clear, LUSCA Studio was going on at that time. So we were doing a lot of different projects for a lot of different people on campus and then some community members. Mm-hmm. And then our dean at the time came to us with this idea of a book. And actually, it was just an idea. I don't even know if a book was the form it was supposed to take, but let's make something happen with this. And of course, Easton, you're a photographer. You're like, well, it's got to be a photo book. Right. Yeah. And me being a designer, I'm like, okay, it's got to look good. It's got to look pretty, right?
Yeah, we were given a very finite timeline for completion. I think that's how it ended up as a photo book, because it was, you know, the pitch was, I have this idea. Let's, you know, here's this thing, here's a chapter. And then Dean Ennis was like, you have to have this done by X timeline. And so we were kind of, the only way that we can do this to do something effective is, you know, maybe a photo book is the easiest thing we can do. And it's going to be really complicated, but we got to get this done.
Yeah. And then remind me, Selkei, Tracy, and Marcello, did we actually tell you what the timeline was, or was it like, oh,
No.
we're gonna do this project and yeah, let's just work on it. We'll let you know when it actually needs to be due.
It came after the fact of, oh, we need to, pick up that pace a little bit. And at least for Selkei and myself, it was also overlapping our graduating senior semester with our art show. So it was an adventure. It was fun. I'll leave it at that for now.
If I recall, we only found out about the deadline the first time Marcello wrote out with us, because that's when
I think it was actually in class we found out. I remember it was like my first class, we were talking about it, and then all of a sudden there was this deadline. I'm like, what? Wait, you're going out and shooting this week? What? All right, let's just do it.
I believe Tracy and I had gone out photographing a couple of times, and you came, we found out about the deadline, and you were like, maybe I should come along so I know what's going on.
So actually, that brings me to a great question. So Tracy and Selkei, can you talk to a little bit about, your experiences going out and shooting? Because, you're on waterways. So sometimes it's on land and sometimes you're on boats. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Selkei, do you want to start and I'll follow?
I mean, I still miss the time we spent on the boat. It was amazing. Like, all jokes aside, earlier today, I got a chance to mention a little bit about how it was kind of fun, the stereotypes of the South and private land, and how sometimes when we were driving, we were showing up on land that maybe was a little bit difficult to access. And, Tracy actually got a chance to meet some wild homeowners that randomly appeared. At least one shoot we were on. But I still miss the boat times. Like, I miss getting up that early, riding on the boat, photographing all day. Yeah,
I mean, I'd say for photographers, the three of us will kind of get this. It could sometimes be a really isolating process. I mean, there's something very solitary about it. And what it actually really informed, I think, the way that I worked later on, or desired to work, is less in this kind of isolated space and more collaboratively, or working just even with other photographers, other creatives, just even outside the arts. So at least for me, I kind of missed those days of it. And it was just really great opportunities to get out there. There's Selkei mentioned about the boat. I missed that undeniably. There's a infamous photo of me with my, head wrapped with a scarf, and it was, it was a little cold, a little chilly, but I still miss those days, and it's just a lot of great memories that came out of it.
I'm not sure we have that photo, but I'm going to share the photo.
Probably for the better.
At the beginning. But yes.
no, there it is.
No, it's yeah.
Guys. So sometimes it was on land. So I'm assuming logistically, Easton, it was probably difficult because, the boat, if I understood, it's a university boat, correct?
Yeah. That's the Marine Science owns several boats, and we reached out to the College of Science via the provost office, and we were able to secure multiple times. I think we did we do 2 or 3 trips, long trips out on the boat?
At least 3, because I think this photo is from the first trip, these photos, when we were on the smaller boat, and then we were on a pontoon, I want to say 3 times.
I think I only came out with you guys once. I know that. That was one of it was maybe the second trip.
Okay. Yeah.
I know that there was one that is Tracy wrapped in the scarf. That was a 4 a.m., 5 a.m. call down at I think it was the Waccamaw landing, or is it Wachisaw landing down in Murrells Inlet? I can't remember which. I think it's Waccamaw. I don't know. I can't remember the name of the landing, the specific landing. Yeah.
How many locations did you guys visit?
Hundreds.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
I mean,
and how many photographs did you? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Thousands.
Hundreds and hundreds.
It started out with Tracy. I met Tracy is a little bit more sparing with how many photos that she takes than I am. So just in my personal take, before or after I edit it to begin pairing up, I think I handed over maybe 550 photos. I want to say Tracy was the same or pretty close. And so I know on my trip, I shot probably something like 10,000 photos over the course of that like 2-month period that we were doing the field work, which, just to bounce back to what Tracy had mentioned about how solitary field work can be, Tracy and I both tend to do documentary predominant photography. So, well, there's a certain amount of like traveling to a location, and there's a certain amount of control you have. So much of it requires you just being there. So it's difficult to say how many locations, because there would be the locations on the way to the goal. There would be the locations near the goal that would become more important than the place we were going to. And so it's frankly just really hard to count those kind of numbers, because it's more about the days spent traveling and watching and looking, and then looking at what we've taken and looking for what doesn't communicate or what we needed to replace.
And I think another part of that that I only just now remembered learning about at the time is just, rivers, they have kind of a life to it where they kind of shift and move a little left, a little right, so to speak, as kind of years pass. So we would have sometimes, a map, an idea of where we wanted to end up. And then we were like, oh, we can't get access to there because things have kind of shifted or meandered. So having to kind of strategically navigate that in the moment, kind of working off of different maps or just off the cuff a little bit was another aspect of it as well.
And I mean, with Selkei and Tracy, I think I'm kind of curious about how your relationship as photographers, that collaborative relationship, evolved as you went through like encountering these challenges of, oh, I can't get to that space. Or, it's like, and how you change kind of the way that you shot throughout that field work.
Selkei, do you want to start?
Oh, I was going to actually ask.
I'm trying to, well, I would say I was in certain ways a little bit more timid compared to maybe Selkei or Easton initially, in terms of like kind of getting into the thick of it. And I think actually out of that experience, it really kind of helped me grow as a photographer to feel a little bit more comfortable, just diving in, so to speak. I'm simplifying, of course, but I would say for me, that was a big aspect of it. Just figuring out how to adapt, and sometimes would let them lead and I would kind of follow in certain regards.
You also, got better at jumping into the thickets when you finally got like boots and pants that would hold up to it.
Yeah. So I don't know, I'm originally from New York. So, getting into the mud and nitty gritty was a little bit outside of my comfort zone at that time of my life. I got my first pair of boots that were actually boots that were not for fashion because of this trip. And that was because Selkei took me to the store to get something affordable at the time. I had borrowed clothing actually from my partner because I did not have a proper sweater and clothing to. So it was just one of those, there's a preparedness side of it that I wasn't expecting, but now, I mean, that's what I do for a living. So it became my normal, which is kind of the funny part of it.
Yeah, I'd say it fundamentally guided the way I make images now, both the texture and style of the kind of images I create, whether moving or still, but also the collaborative element. Throughout the course of this project, there were a lot of duplicates in the sense that Tracy shot one version of an image and I shot the other version of an image. It would be like the same subject or the same concept, but very different takes. And we've since continued collaborating to this day. And one of the nice things about working with both Tracy and Easton with photography, and Marcello as well, but you tend not to go out photographing with me randomly, was learning to know what images I would be pulling a stronger version of versus what, they would be pulling a stronger version of, and learning not to step on each other's toes, and therefore getting a greater body of images across the board, because we're not duplicating each other's work. but still making work that covers these things and meshes together. I think it has taken a long time. I think still to a certain extent, in a lot of ways, our work can look very similar at times where, but definitely years after, there would be times where it would be kind of hard to tell if Tracy took a photo or I took a photo. We had a funny moment. Well, Tracy was in grad school, and right before I had gone into grad school, where within, I think, 2 weeks of each other, we had both photographed a green car. I lived in Portland, Oregon at this moment, and she lived in
was
the
in Durham
Raleigh,
at the time.
Durham, yeah, Durham
Wow.
area. And we both happened to take this like bullseye composition of an antique green car from the side at the same sort of like structure. And I think I sent it to her, and she was like, "You got to be kidding me. I just took this." And so there was a long time where our work was indistinguishable in certain ways.
So I want to turn this over a little bit to Marcello, because you said you went out photographing with them. And as a designer, that
How
had to be
horrible
a
was
very
that?
new experience. What was that like?
Actually, for me, I already had a background, not necessarily in still photography, but I had studied cinematography. It's something that I had wanted to do earlier in life. And then having the opportunity to go out with them, it's because we kind of like changed a little bit, not necessarily the overall direction, but I remember we'd had the discussion. It's like, we need to have some video for what we wanted to do for certain aspects of the book. So going out there and really working with them, it was interesting to see their approach to landscapes, individually, and then watching those interactions, just as far as like, what is the best perspective? Where do we go from here? How does this fit in, to the overall story that we want to tell? Even though it's like, I don't know how many of those conversations we had necessarily in depth. But I know, once we started getting into the filming, I felt like that was an area where I definitely was more comfortable and maybe was possibly pushing them to a little bit of a different place, right? Because I know Easton always has fond memories of me directing the captain to basically just run into things and let's see what happens. Just run into it. Let's go. You need a level of like, and I'm sure they got tired of me saying, I want things more personal. They're not close enough. They're not intimate enough, So that was fun to do. And especially it's like, I did not know them at all. This is really the first time that we had been out together. So there's an element as when you're collaborating with people, and especially it's not just that, we have different disciplines. There's also a huge age gap between us as well, generationally. So for me, I knew I was like, okay, don't take over the whole thing. This isn't your thing. You got to kind of let this roll. But I think at the same time, too, it's understanding that, whether you are a designer or a photographer, there's a certain level of ego that you need to have. And that's not a negative thing. That's a very positive thing where you need to express what you think is right. There's a reason you're out there. There's a reason that you picked up that camera. There's a reason that you are designing things and you're making a layout because you see something and somebody else sees it as well. So that was the part where, I knew that already. And I said, okay, if I'm going to make a suggestion, let's do it. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. It's fine, but let's have it. And let's push forward. So that was good, because I think too, it helps to create bonds once you kind of go into that area where you're making yourself more vulnerable with other people, especially other designers. I think that's where you start to build trust.
Wonderful.
Can I just add something to that?
Please.
It's really funny as you were talking about, guiding. I did Marcello and I did the filming, and I also photographed. And I was thinking, when you were talking about giving, guidance and acting as a director, how that actually gave me a lot of confidence in my own work afterwards. It helped me feel very vindicated in the way that I perceived the images I wanted to make. So and you speaking about like the ego that one needs to have, that you believe a thing is correct, even with someone else pushing and guiding, I ended up, I feel like, developing a lot of that from that guidance and that direction.
So you have all these photographs taken, and now it's time to start production, right? So you have thousands of photographs, or hundreds, up to thousands. How do you go?
1,500.
How much?
It was 1,500. I remember that
1,500.
number when we started, like, and that was what they selected. That was what we were given, was 1,500.
I
So
might have
how do
been
you-
optimistic when I said 500 from each of us.
How do you start to simplify that and narrow it down to actually fit within a structure of a book?
You know, the first thing I remember that we started thinking about, like off the bat, right? It's kind of like, and I would say it's more of, I would say my own process. I'm not going to say every designer goes through this, is that the low hanging fruit that you look at is like, okay, what's just visually appealing? What do I love? What do I think is like, this is fantastic. This is really great. But also I remember we had spoken about format. We understood that we had these really great landscapes, and what was the best way to bring that to life, not only to display, you know, the talent and of the actual photographers themselves, but really to tell that story. And we knew we had, you know, I remember we had these conversations, and I was like, we had to have a double gatefold, and you can see it right here on screen, right? And that really brings that to life. So from there, going past just what's visually appealing, it's like, well, how do you tell a story with this? Because you need a story, even if you don't think that it's there. And we only had images at this stage, but we knew we had to incorporate more than just that imagery, right? So you can see, like, within the book, we have these areas where it's just more graphic, it's type, it's a simplification. You know, you sit there and you start to like kind of needle away at like, okay, how do we really tell this? And it's difficult because we also knew that this is part of a larger story. We were only telling a chunk, right? We just have this little chunk within South Carolina, but there's this bigger thing that really is taking place. So how can we get this to be relevant? How can we make it that it seems like it's somewhat cohesive, right? Then it's somewhat linear in the way that we're telling it, and make it interesting at the same time. And it's tough because at the same, you can look at it and go, well, where are the characters? Well, the characters are the environment, right? That is the character that you have. But when you don't have people, it's usually very difficult for people to grasp something that's just landscapes. You know, everybody likes to, I mean, it's our human nature, right? We want to see ourselves. We want to have some kind of connection to it. So that, to me, like, those are the things that kind of went through my mind, and a lot of the challenges. There's obviously the technical aspects, which, Scott, I remember you were great at helping me really guide me through that process when we started talking about layout, right? And formatting of images, and just whether, you know, are there two images on a page? Is there a single image on a page? How does that flow with everything else? Like, you get so detailed. These are the things that people aren't seeing. And this is where it's like, it's going beyond the photography aspect. And I know that, you know, Selkei and Tracy, we got you guys involved a little bit into that, but I think there was a point where you guys were just kind of like, oh, okay, this is cool and all, but I just want to photograph shit. I don't need to, I don't want to get this in deep, but I love the double gatefolds. I remember Selkei, you're like, awesome, love it, fantastic. So
I was such a pain about my my panoramas that I was so glad that you were on board.
But I mean, it really was a testament to the photography we had, because it made it difficult to make those selections, right? Because that is such a different experience. And that's the part when you come in as a designer, where you need to understand, it's like you're dealing in a different area, where it's not just a visual thing, or it's not just a digital thing. There's a tangible aspect to what it is that you're doing that's going to affect the impression of the viewer, right? And the work that they've done. So when we're looking at what's the double gatefold, it's like, well, it's not just what's visually appealing. Again, it goes back to what's the best thing that really is telling that story, what fits within the context of the entire thing.
Well, do you guys remember we printed off, I think we did print almost 1,000 color laser prints, put them up
Nightmares
in
about
the
it.
studio. And then we even brought like the night staff, because Scott, we met till almost 9 o'clock at night, you know, what, twice a week, I think, across the street in a building that we don't even occupy anymore. We actually brought the night staff. I don't know if you guys remember that, to sit with us and do the editorial because we felt we were all too close to this project, and we needed to, I don't know. I remember them having at least an interesting conversation with us about the photographs. And
I mean, it
so,
was floor to ceiling
yeah,
of what you're describing, of just images, like row after row after row, and all of us coming around. I can't remember if it was like post-it notes or marker or something, and we're all just each had our own color and making marks to kind of create that preference and everything. And some back and forth. Sometimes it was unanimous, sometimes it was very divided. And trying to kind of narrow things down, kind of going back to how Selkei and I kind of developed a similar style. Again, photographing the same thing, but we still had our own slightly individual take to it. And, again, what tells the best story, which one's going to make the cut. It was a process, but it was great.
Yeah, I also follow up the double gatefold, which you see here on the screen. Our goal was to make a coffee table book, one that would sit out in somebody's front room and be a staple. So we made the book as large as possible. And a double gatefold, there's really only like 2 or 3 printers in this country that could actually pull that off. And you can see one of the pictures where Selkei's on a press check where we're actually looking at color and things like that. But we actually had to go up to Philadelphia. I think it was just outside of Philadelphia, if I remember correctly, to actually print this, because we finally got a printer to say, yeah, we'll try it. It's a large book, but I think we can make this happen. Is that right? Yeah, we were up in Philly, right?
we were, yeah.
Yeah.
Because everybody had graduated. Everybody was gone.
Yes.
And then Selkei decided to stick around to see the project through because Tracy was at Duke. Marcello, had you moved to New York at that time? And so it's like the project wasn't even finished yet because our timeline, it didn't get extended. But was that over the winter holiday? Because I want to say that there was the Edwards Gala.
It was spring break. It had to be spring break.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it was the spring.
Spring break. So there was the Edwards Gala that was going to launch this event. So Ali, you might have been a part of the planning of that gala. And so everything was sort of riding on this book getting finished, and the thing that's the elephant in the room that we haven't really talked about, which is the tech behind the project. And so that's Marcello's fault. And so
It got done though.
Yeah, and just to put things in perspective, is like we started off the project as members of Luska Studio, but that is when the Athenaeum Press, because this project was going so well, Dan Ennis, the dean at the time, said, this could become a project that we keep doing over time, different types of subject matters. And we brought in Ali, and we brought in Trish O'Connor as the founding director of the Athenaeum Press. So I believe it started as Luska Studio, but then it transpired and moved on to the Athenaeum Press. So we actually brought in it wasn't just the group of us. We brought in a graduate writing class into it. We brought in other people, a history professor, Wink Prince, which I believe wrote the introduction for. And we started adding other components to it. And actually, that's where I want to go with is Marcello. We don't see it in this photo, but there was a digital component because, of course, we do have a digital component. Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. So I know when we were talking about the book at that time, and I've always been this way, like always interested in new technologies, new ways of communicating in media. Augmented reality was a thing. And we had a few guys, there was somebody who's kept coming to CCU at the time, trying to push augmented reality. And, it was super cool. And I kind of had a handle on it, and I looked at the book. And when we started to think about this, using our empathy skills, right? The idea behind this augmented reality portion of the book was, how can we make this applicable to not just younger people, but older people as well? And I remember, I think the shtick that I used to have for it is like, okay, if you make this an augmented reality feature in this book, right, where you open it up and there's an image there and you put your iPad over it and it understands what that image is, and then it turns into a video, right? So this is the reason we had all these video sequences that were added on, because it wasn't a part of that original scope of what we were doing. If we do this, we add a layer to this story that's not here. It doesn't take over what the photography is doing, but it adds an element of interest and excitement that you might not necessarily have with an audience that just, they need video, they want something a little bit more engaging. But at the same time, you could also have this older audience that, maybe they don't at that time, you know, there was still this idea that, oh, you know, older people don't use these things, which is definitely was not true whatsoever, but we adhered to it. But that was I think that element of adding this digital portion, technological, where you could expand the story, you could see where you could take something that was static and turn it into something that was really more exciting and appealed to more audiences. I feel like that was a core foundational element for actually the press, right? Because the press, that is the concept, was the concept behind the press, is that we're print and we're digital. So I feel like that this inaugural book really put us on that road.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Did I answer that completely? I may have rambled.
But didn't
Wonderful.
Marcello, didn't you design the Athenaeum Press logo? And it was designed intentionally that way? So it's both
Yes.
paper and pixel.
Yeah, that was the concept behind it, was that, you know, it's like it's a pixel and a piece of paper and it's right down the middle, and then we're just moving forward with it. And I believe we were one of the first presses that we didn't actually occupy a physical space. We didn't occupy anything. It was just a concept that we had, and we rolled with it because it's like we don't need to have necessarily a physical space. We have a physical space when we need it, but we can work in the digital world as well. And I feel like we were, I'm not going to say this right out, we were way ahead of our time in what we were doing then, and we're even to a degree even ahead of our time now. I still, and this is my world today, and I'm very, you know, see the things that are going on with augmented reality, and I look and I'm like, we've come a long way, but we haven't. I'm like, it's kind of crazy to see that, because I don't even, and I know that there are augmented reality books out there for sure, but when I pose these, I mean, I've reused this concept a million times for tactics that we do. And some people will get it. There are others that are really amazed by it and they think it's super cool, but it's not always, they don't always want to embrace it because it seems a little weird. And I'm like, this is old hat, man. But I'll say one more thing is, like, part of doing all of this, I know for myself, I give a ton of credit to this book for getting me my first opportunity out of college. The reason that I was able to go to DC, partly 100% because you guys, I mean, the relationships we had, the relationships that were in DC, 100%, that is the incredible opportunity I had. But then, you know, that book, they looked at that and were like, you guys are doing what? You're in college? This is the things you guys are doing in college. They were very, very surprised at that. And I mean, even when I, you know, moved to New York, part of me showing my portfolio was I 100% showed the book. 100%.
Marcello, you actually led to the next question I'd like to ask Selkei and Tracy is, it's like, what did this Paper Canoe project, what stood out in terms of helping you with your career?
I have
start,
one
I guess,
because of
or-
it. I mean, that's really similar to what Marcello was saying about the portfolio. I moved to Philly shortly after that press check and ended up working at a print shop that was our business connection to the actual printer themselves for about a year. I went to grad school, and the Paper Canoe project it wasn't my portfolio, but it was something I brought to supplement my portfolio and show, you know, not only do I make this kind of work, but I work collaboratively. I work in, you know, with follow through and constructing narratives.
Yeah, and I'd say for me, you know, kind of similar. I finished out that semester. I graduated. I was actually very briefly living on the road, traveling and photographing in a documentary practice and storytelling practice. And while on the road, I'm putting together applications to grad school with this book at the top, basically as my application or my portfolio. So I ended up going to Duke, and I studied experimental, it's my dog in the background, but experimental and documentary arts became essentially what I studied, and that's still what I practice today. I'm now in higher education, teaching the same things that I was learning as a student, just, you know, in more of a now 10 years fast forward contemporary sense. So.
Great. And actually, it brings me to another question. It's like, what are you doing now? I mean, we see Marcello saying he's up in New York. Tracy, you're in Reno. It's like, kind of like, what's your pathway and what are you doing now? Start with Tracy.
Sorry. Okay, cool. Yeah. So kind of just we were going over. So I'm now working towards tenure as a professor in the Department of Art at the University of Nevada, Reno. I teach photography. I do a little bit of videography at both the undergraduate and graduate level. I'm still making my own work. I have my creative practice is essentially just it's kind of blend through fine art and documentary. So literally what I was doing 10 years ago, I'm still doing that today. I'm trying to, find exhibitions and working on a project right now, actually for another book. So kind of dealing with the same things that we dealt with then, round two. So.
Great. How about Selkei?
Right now I'm in a I'm trying to redirect the way my career is going. I was freelancing as a filmmaker and photographer in New York, and when the pandemic hit and shut everything down, that career never really came back. But it did give me the opportunity to start writing and start building things. So I've been very fortunate right now to just have a bit of time to write and make things and keep photographing. Assuming the classes make next semester, I should be teaching a handful of classes at Coastal. So that'll be cool. But yeah.
And Marcello.
So currently I'm an associate creative director, specifically in art. I work at a company called Accenture Song. So our focus is pharmaceutical advertising. So all of big pharma are our clients. And my role is essentially to do 360 marketing tactics. And that can be anything from like websites to experiential design, print, everything that would really be required as far as like whenever you have something like a drug or a therapy that goes to market. I'm the guy behind a lot of the stuff. Some of the things I can say that I haven't done the terrible ones, but it's been very, very interesting. It's a huge shift. I never saw my career going in this direction because I had no idea what pharma marketing was, nor did I care whatsoever. But it's interesting to see. I've learned a ton being in this space, and it's been great as far as being able to even bring in like that's more of like my kind of like generic job of what I do. But as far as like what I'm focusing on right now, it's similar to what we were doing. It's a lot of immersive technologies, looking at things like augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, a lot of generative AI, and really taking all of these type of new technologies and seeing how they're applicable to patients and the patient experience. Really looking at, how can we improve the world in general and break down some of these barriers that lead to, and you'll hear this term used a lot, better patient outcomes, but it's just like, how can we be more efficient and extend life? So it's not the most, if I have to be completely honest and transparent, from an art direction standpoint, there's so many parameters and limitations that a lot of times you feel hampered, and it's not the sexiest thing to do in art. But what you can learn and what you actually get into, the challenges that you face are really interesting. Especially, I deal a lot with oncology and dealing with cancer and rare disease and things like this. So there's an element like, definitely I've challenged the plasticity of my brain and learning by having going to a completely different area where it's like, okay, it's not just about how sexy and cool it looks. There's something that's going to be affected. Like there's going to be a doctor who's going to read something on a chart that you've designed now. Did you give them the right information? Did you do these things correctly? And that can really affect somebody. So that's me in a nutshell.
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, we have this gathering, and first, I just wanted to say, just as the second director of the Athenaeum Press after Trisha O'Connor, just what an honor it's been to watch you all as you each have gone through your careers post press and continue to do really important work in the areas of storytelling. So it's been wonderful and thank you all for setting the tone for 10 years of work that the press has created. We are broadcasting this, obviously, and we'll be keeping it also for our archives. We have some students that are also watching down in the press office now. And so I wanted to ask if, yes, okay. I wanted to ask if y'all, how can we keep, how can our students keep in touch with you and see more of your work?
I can start if you want. Tracy, go ahead. It's all you.
I was gonna say, I mean, Instagram is a weird space right now with photography. I kind of use it loosely, but follow me on Instagram at tsfish, F-I-S-H. My website is tsfishphotography.com. So kind of keep everything consistent and clean. But yeah, you guys can follow me there. I have my contact. You guys can always reach out and email me directly as well.
So you can don't follow me. Just follow yourselves. Do your own thing. Don't worry about following everybody. Okay. No, you can find me, easiest to find me like on LinkedIn. A lot of my work tends to be behind closed doors because it's proprietary, because it's big pharma, but you can find me on Instagram at like hey_Marcello. Also my website, garofalodesign.com. You can actually see a lot of, I still keep up a lot of the work. It's more innovative than a lot of the things I've come across, which is really funny to say, but it's very applicable.
For me, it's like Tracy, easiest is Instagram. So Angry Bayo, so it's ANGRYBEO. Spelling is my strong suit, right? From there you can find my website, email, contact, all that jazz. But frequently stuff is sort of like Marcello's experience, where it's has to be owned by, so much of mine was freelance. It was owned by the people I created it for. So I might have like samples or segments, but not very much of the completed pieces.
Wonderful. And it looks like that there actually may be some questions, but folks are having some issues getting getting them into our chat. So let me, while I'm transitioning downstairs to post those questions, if you all have just a couple seconds, if you wouldn't mind actually just giving a word of advice to the students in terms of like, other than Marcello, don't follow you, do your own thing. But, it's like also, as we're kind of looking back to give a little bit of context from this question, we've been doing this press thing for the last 10 years, making all sorts of multimedia projects. In terms that we have some students that are just encountering this process or just starting on a new project as we speak. And so if there are any words of advice that you might give to these students as they're encountering a very similar process, including running into things on boats, to our future students, and I'll transition down off screen and type in some questions on the chat.
Do you want me to start? I guess I can
Sure.
throw something out there. Sure. First and foremost, adaptability, and that's something that's not just from within the press. You're going to deal with that your entire life, no matter where your career takes you. So the biggest thing is just be open-minded and adaptable, and that's something you'll be able to apply through everything that you do. I would say collaboration would be something else. I'm just thinking you're going to learn how to work with different people, whether it's, within the medium that you're working with or externally. And again, these are all things you're going to apply throughout your entire life. At least those are the tools that I learned and I still apply today. But those are the first two things that come to mind. Selkei or Marcello, if you guys have any other.
Figure out what you're good at and what you like, so that you can learn to trust yourself, and you'll know what you aren't good at, and you can find people who are good at those things. It is really helpful to be a jack of all trades, but don't try and be a master of everything. Just learn enough to be able to vet others' skills. And when you can afford to, if you're collaboratively working, don't work on the stuff that you don't enjoy. And I don't mean the projects, I mean the part of the project. Like if you don't enjoy writing copy, or you don't enjoy doing the photography or layout or whatever it is, find people who love it, because it's going to be so much better than what you will do forcing yourself. Now, again, you got to learn how to do these things to a certain extent so you can vet the quality of the people you find. But you don't have to be an expert in everything, but you do have to learn to trust yourself. Others are going to tear you down enough or tell you not trust that you don't know what you're doing. So why waste your own energy not trusting yourself?
Yeah, and I'm going to ladder off of Selkei's point. Confidence is big. It's not easy to gain, especially when you're surrounded by people who have a lot more experience than you. Doesn't mean that they know more than you.
Everybody's faking it.
Everybody's faking it. Everybody's in a legacy mentality 99% of the time, and they're actually looking for somebody to break them out. And even if you're wrong, that's totally fine. You're better being wrong and putting yourself out there. And I would say the one last thing is, like, I don't think it gets talked about enough, but it goes back to being who you are. Remember this: talent levels out. At a certain stage, talent just levels out, and it becomes about relationships. And we forget that because we're so digitally focused these days. And that's not going to change. It's just going to get more and more and more. But with all of that happening, you know, what you end up encountering is that you go, do I want to work with this person for the next year, 2 years? I don't really care how talented they are. Do I actually have to see them day to day? Because those are those intangibles that you don't really think about as much, but chemistry matters, especially in a collaborative environment. You're going to this collaborative field. How you feel about that other person and how they feel about you is going to affect the work. And it's something that I always look at. And there are times where, you know, as you get more experience, you're going to make that decision and go, you know what? I don't care how much you're paying me. I don't care what that is. I don't want it because it's not the right chemistry for me. That's
Is
like
it kind of Tuck, you want to go ahead or?
Yeah, just real quick about the
Yeah.
being wrong thing. I think that's a really solid point, because it's better to be wrong and willing to change your opinion or willing to shift what you're doing when someone shows that that's better than it is to not do anything. When I started taking writing courses again, one of the pieces of advice I got that was really helpful is you can edit anything but a blank page. Like, if there's words, you can make it better, but if there's not, there's nothing. So be willing to be wrong, but also be willing to change and adapt, like what Tracy said.
Wonderful. This is wonderful. It looks like Allie's finally down with the students, so I'm sure they're going to get some questions going on here. But I have one quick question in terms of, like, this has been 10 years that we've been doing this. It's like, well, actually, Allie has a question. Do you all have any advice on how to initiate projects of the magnitude today?
Do it. Start doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds glib, but
I guess more specifically, when you're thinking about it within the context of the school environment or just in general. If it's, you know, I would say this: approach this as if there are no boundaries, no limits. And it's really just, you're making presentations of stories. It's like, if you have the idea, start outlining that idea. Start collaborating with other people, talking about it, push it out there, push that idea out in the world and get perspective. And then it's really, man, all of this is storytelling. So much of this is storytelling. And we deal in design, but not to go out in too many different directions, but law storytelling. If you think about it, there's a theater, there's a story. You're in that same boat. So if you have that, and you know what, use your resources. I'm sure you're all using ChatGPT every day, if not a ton of other language learning models. You can use those to your benefit in good ways. It doesn't have to be that you're just cheating on a test when you have to use this to write a paper in 5 seconds, right? Use those resources, learn things, go, and just like you have so much at your fingertips, if you have a question, ask it, and then present it to people. Don't be afraid to present it to anybody.
Also, just do the things that you love at the end of the day, and the rest is going to follow too. Because if you don't have the passion about what you're working on, it's going to be so hard to then translate that to everybody else and communicate that and get the rest of the buy-in. My dog apparently again agrees with me in the background if you heard that. But yeah, just do at the end of the day what you love, and just get started, dive into it. A lot of this takes research. Like, we didn't talk about this, but we were reading through the journals. We were doing a lot of historical contextualization on the back end, just to kind of get a better understanding of plays. And again, these are the same things that I'm still doing today, to tell stories, whether it's still regional stories that I'm telling where I'm at now, whether it's more broader or personal diaspora stories that I'm exploring for my other creative work. So yeah, do the research, do what you love, and just get it done. Just do it.
Ali posted another question. I guess that's more for, I guess, me. What is the future of the press? Well, it's amazing that Chasing the Paper Canoe was our first project. But since then, we've done 14 other projects over the course of the last 11 years, which really the Paper Canoe set the stage for it, because every year we had to try to outbeat that. So we've done some crazy stuff in terms of museum exhibits, which we rely on you guys as alumni to help. Like, Marcello was part of our first museum exhibit because he worked at a museum exhibit firm. And we just got done with an international collaboration with an organization or a school over in Germany. And we have a lot of projects keep going. We're finishing up a 3-year grant project with I'm sorry, I can't remember our grant partner, but where we've been working with the Gullah Geechee corridor. And our next project, I don't know if I've actually mentioned this to you guys, is on the history of the banjo and its connection to African diaspora and Appalachia. So we're partnering with a school up in Southwest Virginia, and we're going to start talking about the history of the banjo, and hopefully partnering with the Birthplace of Country Music Museum to do another exhibition. So, Marcello, I really blame you for the whole exhibition idea, because of course you went to work for an exhibition design firm.
Well, hey man, you guys turned me on to them, so blame yourselves.
But I actually have just one last question. Is like, now that you've been in your career now, I guess 10 years, is there something you've learned in your career that you wish you would have known back when you were in college?
I think those words of advice we gave earlier, like the confidence and trusting myself, that would have been much more helpful for me. Having a faith in myself that the things that I am doing or saying have value.
Wonderful. Either one, Marcello or Tracy?
Yeah. You go ahead, Tracy.
Go for it. I'm still rattling my brain.
I would say find the eye of the storm. It's all chaos. It really is all chaos, and that's what you're looking for. And it's okay, because you come to find out that everybody's just in it, and if you can just be that, that kind of, maybe you're not doing everything right, but just keep pushing forward, you'll find it, and others will appreciate the fact that you're pushing the way through, because everybody's looking for somebody to just speak up and say, this is what we're going to do. Be that person.
Wonderful.
I'd say sorry. I was just going to say, for me, I don't think it's necessarily that I could have learned from you guys, but just like for myself, like my present day self telling to my past self of just having more trust in what you're doing and trust in the idea and faith in that, because you're going to find yourself through doing projects in general or the creative process, and it's going to evolve over time. So like me, again, 10 years ago is not the Tracy today. So just having that trust in yourself to kind of develop yourself and find your voice to then also further tell these narratives and these stories at the end of the day.
Also, we're all narrative creatures, so everything is story. Literally everything. That's the only way we exist.
Well, we're coming up over an hour. I think the five of us could talk all day. And it's amazing to actually get back together in the same, well, virtual space and kind of catch up. But I think we'll probably kind of call this an end. I really appreciate your all of your time. You guys are all over the country. Again, this was the inaugural project from the Athenaeum Press. And you know, we're continuing to do that. You can always follow our work at theathenaeumpress.com. You could follow us at Athenaeumpress_press or ccu.press. And Allie's email is there. So please reach out if anybody ever has any questions, and please follow us and see what amazing things we might do next. Again, Tracy, Selkei, Marcello, we really appreciate time. Yeah, it's just great to see what you guys have become.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.